a total lot area of approximately 654 square metres. The site currently contains a single dwelling and an outbuilding, and there's one crossover to Patullos Road. The site sits between residentially zoned land on its southern and western boundaries, and then has commercial zone on its eastern boundary, which contains several small shops, including a bakery. The proposal is for the construction of 5 two-storey dwellings and the subdivision of the land into 5 allotments with a common property access way and the waiver of 1 visitor space. When you have 5 or more dwellings, 1 visitor space is required to be provided, but you can apply to waiver that as part of the planning application. So the proposal is for 5 two-bedroom dwellings, and they have a separate access for vehicles and for residents. So the vehicle access is located adjacent to the commercial zone, and the residents' pedestrian access is adjacent to the neighbouring property in the residential zone on the western side. Each dwelling has reverse living arrangements with living and kitchen upstairs and bedrooms downstairs, and there's a balcony that comes off the living areas at the top floor of of all 5 dwellings, and that's the allocated area of secluded private open space, and that overlooks the commercial zone. The subject site is located within a general residential zone, Schedule 1, and it's not affected by any overlays. And Patullos Road is a transport zone Schedule 3, so it's a municipal road, but it's a high-level municipal road, and it requires vehicles to enter and exit the site in a forward direction. The application before us was referred to relevant internal and external departments and authorities. None of these have objections to the proposal, subject to their recommended conditions and notes being included on any permit issued if one is to be issued. The application was advertised to adjoining owners and occupiers of land, and a total of 6 objections have been received. A consultation meeting wasn't held, but the applicant provided a response in writing and in plan form to the objections that were lodged, and this was circulated to all of the objectors. Some of the changes that were made were specifically to address the matters raised of concern by the objectors. Some of these changes, not all of them, but some of them include things like obscuring windows up to 1.8 metres from floor level above the 1.7. They have reduced the front setback by 200 millimetres, which provides a 200 millimetre increase in the rear wall setback from the rear boundary of the site to comply with side and rear wall boundary setbacks requirement of Res Code. And the rear-facing windows were also raised to 1.85 metres from the floor level, above the 1.7 standard. It was also noted that existing boundary fencing for the 2 residential interfacing properties on the south and the western side, the existing boundary fences will be retained, and on the western fence there will be additional screening added to ensure, to the existing fence to ensure overlooking is restricted. Following the circulation of the plans, no objections were withdrawn and the matter was called to a planning committee meeting. In terms of the assessment, the application has been reviewed against the General Res Zone Schedule 1, Clause 5206 car parking, Clause 55 2 or more dwellings on a lot, and the assessment was also considered under Planning Policy Framework at Clause 1501-5L Neighbourhood Character and Clause 1601-1S Housing Supply. On balance, the proposal is considered to satisfactorily respond to the relevant zone, planning policy and Res Code, noting a high compliance with standards of Res Code has been achieved. And based on the assessment, the proposal is respectfully recommended to be supported with conditions for amended plans. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillors, do we have any questions? I have one. First, I note that they're all fairly small sized apartments. There's not a great deal. They're all, I think, about 80 square metres, I believe, of that order.
of the lot sizes proposed, yes, they are. They're very small.
Yeah. And could you explain the reasons why they have to be like that?
Oh, they don't. So the applicants put forward a proposal that has them at that size. In their submission, they discuss that they're providing a variability to the housing that's currently in the area. So they're providing small housing for people who may want to downsize, or small housing for people that prefer low maintenance, rather than having a whole house on a large property. So it's just sort of a housing diversity, so that it is encouraged to have a diverse range of housing in neighbourhoods provided.
But this is not in a housing diversity, intense diversity area, is it?
There's two different things. So housing diversity just forms part of any multi-dwelling application in residential policy. But yeah, you're correct. So there's also mapped areas in all town centres relating to increased housing diversity areas, or IHDAs. So this site is not located in that area. They're generally located around the train stations. So the one for LARA is much further east from this subject site.
Thank you very much. Now, councillors, any other questions? Okay, thank you. So we'll now move on to the objectors, and I think the first one is Gordon Halford here? Please come forward, Gordon. Like? Go ahead, Gordon.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. There are three areas that I want to highlight. Firstly, noise levels. I note from the agenda that the response addresses noise from the commercial shops into the new development, but only mentions increased noise levels from the development to existing dwellings once, and then only to say that residential noise created by dwellings is reasonably anticipated within a residential neighbourhood. Yes, that is true, but it is also true that this development is proposing to replace one dwelling with 5 in a very small area. The resulting noise will be much greater. For example, there would be 5 air conditioning units, all placed on the balconies facing east, where the noise will definitely be heard by numbers 2 and 4 Hayden Street. Then there is the potential for 5 cars coming and going within this space. At number 2 Hayden Street, between the hours of 5 a.m. and 10 p.m, we currently have to put up with traffic coming and going from behind the shops and from the police station next door. There are doors banging, radios playing, voices raised, and now we are being told that it is reasonable to expect another 4 dwellings on our northern boundary, which will definitely add to these problems, and I don't feel this issue has been adequately addressed. Secondly, traffic implications. I note that there is a traffic report commissioned by the applicant. I question some of the contents of this report. It states that the posted speed limit is 60 kilometres per hour. It is actually 50 kilometres per hour, and any consultant who really looked at this site would know that. The site pictures in the report show only 1 car parked outside the site. This is rarely the case. Patrons from the shopping strip park along Patullos Road all the time, and there are often 3 or 4 cars parked parallel to the curb outside the development site while their occupants are at the shops. The parking report makes no reference to this. The proposed development is right next to a shopping strip and a problematic intersection with 6 feeders. This is already a high traffic area. At morning and evening rush hours, traffic is banked up in multiple directions from this intersection. The proposed driveway is directly opposite a T intersection with another high volume carriageway. The angled parking in front of the shops limits the view of vehicles that would enter the carriageway from the proposed development. The proposal would undoubtedly increase the hazards of what is already a high-risk location. Add to this that the proposal is requesting a visitor car park waiver, which would add further cars to a street area that is already crowded. The traffic report downplays all these issues and waves them away with the oversimplified statement that The likely traffic generated by the proposal is negligible and will not cause any discernible impacts to the adjacent road network. This is the only comment that the report makes about the possible traffic impacts on this highly congested area. Thirdly, neighbourhood characteristics. I would like to reinforce this issue as the most significant objection to this proposal. The neighbourhood currently has the characteristic of quiet, family living with a definitely rural aspect. The development of what is essentially a block of 5 flats would not be in keeping with this neighbourhood character, which is highly valued. The average land space, block size divided by number of dwellings for each of these units is 131 square metres. In comparison, 38 Patullos Road has 8 units with an average of 247 square metres per unit. How can it be justified or reasonable to approve dwellings with about half the average space allocation in what is a general residential zone where the current characteristics have a definite rural feel? We would like to see an alternative proposal with space utilisation appropriate to the size of the site and the existing neighbourhood characteristics. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. Do we have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gordon, just for clarification, you mentioned here the noise levels from 2 and 4 Hayden Street. Are you a resident of one of those properties?
2.
Excellent, thank you.
2.
Any other questions? I've got a question. There's a shopping centre right nearby.
Right behind our place.
Yeah, so wouldn't that be causing some noise as well?
It causes a lot of noise. In fact, we have quite a lot of noise from a bakery there that operates overnight, and we have restaurants in that strip as well, so we have cars coming and going behind the shops during that.
So wouldn't that be part of the neighbourhood character?
It is as far as our place is concerned, but that's really quite limited to our place. I'll show you some photos shortly, and you will see that it is really quite a rural area when you look at the rest of the area.
Thank you. Thanks, Gordon. So I'll call the next person, Melissa Mason. I declare, I don't believe we're related somehow. We'll keep it quiet anyway.
What it all comes down to, and what validates all of the other objections to this development, is the fact that 24 Patullos Road is not identified as an increased housing diversity area, which identifies areas suitable for medium to high density infill development in the Geelong planning scheme. When addressing the IHDA, the planning scheme states that intensity of redevelopment should be higher at the core of the IHDA and lower at the edge. This site is not even remotely close to the IHDA, and yet if approved, it will become the highest density development in the entirety of LARA. There are no comparable properties that are even remotely close to the high density development being proposed here, not in proximity to the site, not within the IHDA, and again, not in the entirety of LARA. The site is, however, designated for modest infill development on the Geelong Planning Scheme's Housing and Settlement Framework Plan map. The very definition of modest is relatively moderate, limited or small. The size, bulk and density of the proposal does not reflect neighbourhood character objectives in any way. This is even more apparent in a town characterised by the planning scheme as a rural landscape setting, and notes the strategic direction is to protect and enhance key features, including the rural characteristics of LARA. Even with amended plans, front and rear setbacks are still reduced, and needing a car park waiver because it won't fit on the site shows that this is an overdevelopment and is simply too large for the site. Just because it can be squeezed onto the site doesn't mean it should be. Comparison should not be made to the commercially zoned shops next door in justifying reduced setbacks and zero spacing between units. This is a residential development, not a commercial development. Comparison should be made with existing residential neighbourhood only. Otherwise, where does it end? The site is a 30-minute walk from the main transport hub of LARA train station and a 20-minute walk from the town centre. The proposal's density and size cannot be justified just because it is next to a small local shopping strip and bus stops. What residential properties aren't close to bus stops these days? Bring your attention to the Hovels Creek estate currently being built in LARA. 18 townhouses are being built on an almost 6,000 square metre parcel of land. It is right on the edge of the IHDA and is very close to the Lara town centre and train station. Even here, where higher density is perhaps warranted, the density is modest and comes nowhere near what is being proposed at 24 Patullos Road. So I ask, why is this density and scale even being considered for the subject site? It's important to note that when comparing density and scale on Patullos Road within this meeting's agenda, it identifies 38 Patullos Road as 8 standalone two-storey units, when in fact the rear 4 units are single-storey. They were built that way in order to help meet neighbourhood character objectives and not impose over existing neighbours. They were also built on land that is 3 times the size of the proposed development site, meaning again it is nowhere near the density or scale proposed at 24 Patullos Road. We are not against infill development, we are against this development due to the size, bulk and density, which is not appropriate for the site or respectful of the existing neighbours. A single-storey, 2 or 3 unit development would be welcomed by the neighbouring properties, as that would efficiently utilise the site while respecting the highly valued rural neighbourhood characteristics of the area. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Melissa. Just wait there a moment. We might have some questions for you. Do we? I'll follow up with the Mayor's previous question. Are you living next door or where?
We're on the southern side of the development, so right behind it. So essentially, the whole southern wall of the development will take up my back fence line and my adjoining neighbour Kelly's fence line.
So they did make some moves in that way. They moved 200 millimetres.
So essentially, to begin with, they said they wanted reduced setback of 1.84. My understanding is it's meant to be 2.19 metres. If they add 200, I believe that's 2.04, so it's still reduced rear setback.
So there was some negotiation.
Not with me, that was just what's been written in the amended plans to council. Yeah.
Did you actually have any conversations with the proponents? Thank you. Kelly Byrne. Thank you, Kelly. So, go ahead, Kelly.
I would like to firstly address the point of neighbourhood character. Nowhere in the vicinity is there such a dominating structure.
Excuse me, Kelly. Could you just lean into the microphone a bit more?
Yeah. Is this...
Pull it towards you.
Pull it towards you, yeah.
Oh. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Okay. I would like to firstly address the point of neighbourhood character. Nowhere in the vicinity is there such a dominating structure, the likes of which would be very much out of place with the existing landscape. The visual impact on the immediate area of Patullos Road, specifically number 28, along with the residences on all 5 of the shared boundaries, is severe, to say the least. Not only that, but the development will be highly visible from Hayden Street residences, the 6 ways roundabout to quite some way down Patullos and Keys Roads, a full 360 degrees. It would specifically have an enormous visual impact on the backyards of 4 Hayden Street, which will bear the brunt of the imposing structure from the south. With 2 north-facing habitable rooms each, large windows take up the length and height of the rooms and have a direct line of sight to the proposed 2-storey development. If you just refer to A and B, here is a rendition of the expected view from the backyard of 4 Hayden Street, indicating the stark contrast between the proposal and the current landscape. I think you'll agree that it is neither respectful to the area, nor does it strike an appropriate balance to the existing dwellings and line of single-storey shops that it has been described as being in the original proposal. It is stated throughout the agenda that this area is not in the IHDA framework and that the existing neighbourhood character must be considered and preserved, a point which also forms part of the strategies in the planning policy framework. Why then has this proposal been approved when it is blatantly clear that it is excessive and does not meet the criteria? Secondly, I would like to address shadowing. I understand that the report has been undertaken in accordance with standard B21, but I would like the panel to note that the shadowing that this building will cause to the southern dwellings in the winter months, when the sun is at an angle of just 30 degrees, will be extreme and will encroach on these dwellings to a much larger extent. At a time of year when sunlight is craved, the effects will be severe, and your consideration for the effect on the well-being and livability of the existing residents is paramount. A large amount of emphasis has been placed on the subject land being in conveniently close proximity to shops, medical facilities, public transport, etc., in an attempt to justify this over-the-top development. If we truly do want to introduce dwelling diversity and take advantage of the location and the amenities that are readily available, then wouldn't creating a low-maintenance, low-density, entry-level set of units for special needs, disabled or the elderly be a much better use of the location and limited size of this property? Finally, there are concerns surrounding the drainage and runoff of stormwater, particularly from the driveway, that we feel need to be addressed in more detail. With the excessive amounts of rain we have experienced recently, and the fact that we live in a flood zone is cause for thorough attention to be paid. At the end of the day, I understand and respect the need for more diverse housing, but it should not be at the cost and detriment of the existing landscape and overall quality of the neighbourhood. Cramming 5 two-storey townhouses on a 654 square metre block of land is just not sensible. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, and common sense must prevail. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kelly. Councillors, any questions? Did you have one? Yeah, that's good.
Ellie, I was just hoping to get some more detail on the overshadowing. If you could just give a bit more, like, are you saying like the entire backyard in winter would be completely in shadow, or what was your assessment of that?
So, in winter specifically, yes, I think at least between 75 and maybe, I think it was 3.
We'll have to be careful here. We'll just go ahead, please. Yeah.
Yep, sorry. So with calculations that have been estimated, it will be right up to almost the line of the patio, just about a metre from the actual house.
So if you can bear with me for a moment, I'd like to ask the officers how they view the overshadowing. Can you give us your analysis, please, Amelia?
Yeah, absolutely. So in winter time, the shadows are going to be greater, and in summer the shadows will be less. So when you have to assess stuff under Res Code, under Clause 55 or 54, they use the 22nd of September, which is the equinox. So it's the most equal time of the year to take a shadow reading. So it meets the requirements set out at Res Code on the equinox, but as with, basically summer, less shadow than shown on the plans, winter, more shadow than shown on the plans, but we don't assess it under winter. We can only do it to the regulation of the equinox.
So from your point of view, it's within regulations?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
What's currently in that place where the shadowing is occurring? Is there like a veggie patch or something like that, or what's there?
There is a shed to one corner, and I do have plans to, I do have some plants already there, but I have plans to make that a more substantial garden, yes.
So Kelly, I think you mentioned problems with drainage. Could you explain that a bit further?
So with the reports that were done, stormwater drainage, there is reference in the agenda, I think, about, and sorry, I've read so many documents I can't remember which one's which, but there is a statement that there will have to be consent given from residents from Hayden Street because of a pipe or something that goes through for the drainage, and the concern mostly, I don't have a lot of information about that because that was only given to us this week, but the main concern is the runoff from the driveway and where that will go. And with the increased, because it's only a single-storey dwelling at the moment, with the increased dwellings proposed, there will be a lot more runoff that, could potentially end up in the end of our backyards.
Okay, so I'll have to ask the officers again. Has that analysis, are you confident in that analysis, Amelia, or?
Yes, so I received an email on Monday from one of the objectors, and they just had a question about some engineering conditions that are recommended on the draft permit, and they talk about the drainage of the site. So the engineers have looked at it and said the most, because of the fall of the land, the most logical way would be to have a drain running through an easement to a side entry pit in Hayden Street. And the objector asked, what does that involve? So I went to the engineers and asked them. So it does involve, there's putting in a drain in an easement that council have, and the engineer stated that it is better if you can, if consent is given, but apparently under the Subdivision Act it's possible to have access to that easement without consent, but I don't know the legal details of that. It's sort of more of an engineering matter. But they also said it's possible, if there's an issue with that, it is possible to require the applicant to have a pump system to drain the general stormwater to Patullos Road. Because of the fall of the land, they need a pump to pump it out. But they've had a full ESD assessment undertaken on the site, and I don't believe there's any stormwater issues. It's just a general drainage condition for stormwater to be managed on the site.
Okay, thank you. Any more? Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you very much.
So I think we have the applicant here. Mr. Luca McHarry. Perhaps you can tell us who you are again, please.
I'm the town planning consultant that's representing the permit applicant. So my involvement at the start was minimal at the start of the process, but towards the end, in terms of this particular process, I took a far more active role in terms of developing the design response. Originally, it had an application where there was a number of dwellings, 4 access points, a cafe, and there was a constant theme from council about what the council's planning department about what the concerns were with regards to development. They didn't want the expansion of the residential area. Then we came back and we discussed it with the owner and the developer, and there was an idea put forward to have 2 rows of 3 houses with a central driveway down the middle, but that was like the whole design was like it was bursting at the seams type thing. So what we did, we responded to the concerns of the council. So we created a development that was presented only 1 dwelling at the front, took away the coffee shop cafe out of the development. So we limited it to 2 stories. We didn't. There was talk of even going to a 3 because under the general residential zone, potentially to go to 3, but I just thought that was completely out of character. And that was something that Council's Planning Department was not going to support at all, even if it was any attic style or whatever. So we limited it to a two-storey form. We kept the form rather low pitch, so not to unnecessarily increase the height. We have a single dwelling at the front. We provided a triangular roof form. I don't know if you've seen the three-dimensional images. So there's separation from both side boundaries, there's separation from the rear. In terms of access point, we've gone to a single access point, and we've put the vehicle access way towards where the shops are. The same thing with the balconies. So it's a very amenity sort of sensitive area. We didn't want to create something that was problematic. There was an issue about air conditioning units. I mean, we welcome a condition being imposed about having concealed units, so there's no air conditioning noise to residents at the rear. We've discussed that already. And as far as council's policy, and there was talk about it's not in an increased housing diversity area. Increased diversity housing areas, they're where the planning scheme acknowledges these is where higher density housing is suitable, around train stations and other activity centres, and that usually involves 3 up to 4-storey apartment buildings. That's higher density housing. What we're talking here, 2-storey, we're not talking about apartments, we're talking about a townhouse style development. The fact that there was an issue, I mean, someone raised an issue about the size. Yeah, well, there's a correlation between housing affordability and size. There's single household, single person households. There's 2-person households, professionals working. The sort of households we envisage here is, especially in an area like this, is someone that's a 1 or 2-person household, and it's basically targeted more so for the single person. Maybe the downstairs bedroom gets used as a guest room or as a home office or something like that. And the other thing is, when you look at what's happening in LARA in terms of house and land packages, the cheapest house and land package these days is upwards of $750,000. I mean, this...
So, Mr Chair, do we have Councillor Cadwell still?
If you can just pause for a moment.
I think we've lost Councillor Cadwell. I'm sorry for that interruption. Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. We have to have Councillor Cadwell present to maintain a quorum. Screen says she's in the lobby, so any moment now.
Watching a meeting within a meeting within.
You know, I think we perhaps you don't have to go to a practice. Can we find ways to bring telemedicine back, particularly for those who might feel unsafe or who don't have the mobility they need?
Light entertainment while we're waiting.
The job of funding sort of that. This is a...
Gosh.
terribly sorry about this. This can't go on forever. There is a rule that if it goes on for more than half an hour, we'll have to adjourn the meeting. But I'm sure we'll overcome it before that. I'll just go and discuss it.
She's back.
Hello, can you hear me? I'm so sorry, I don't know what happened there, but hopefully I'm back.
You're back.
We're just all trying.
I'm here.
Apologies, Mr. McHarry. Apologies, councillors. And
There you go.
Now the chairman, he's back again now.
I think you're
So-
on the phone to Melissa.
Oh, sorry about that. Would you like to go back a step or two and pick up the threads where you feel comfortable?
Previously, I think I was talking about the increased housing diversity areas where the planning policy around train station, it's for high density housing, so 3-4 story apartments, more intense forms of housing. This again is 2 story. It's what they would call medium density housing. So it's defined as medium density housing, which is suitable in a general residential zone, which is what the site is. Now, one thing about being different and things like this, we acknowledge this is a unique development, but it's also a unique site. So the site's next to a shop. There's plenty of separation between existing dwellings, and we believe that what we've designed here can be absorbed within that surrounding context. We've got the separation from both sides. We've placed the common driveway at the most sensitive area, and in terms of the presentation to the street, there was talk of 3 single-storey dwellings, but yeah, if you had 3 single-storey dwellings, they'd be placed across the front. You'd have 3 garages facing the street. You'd have 3 entry doors, 3 driveways, fragmenting it. I mean, in terms of this, it's responsive to its neighbours. As far as the residential properties, there's plenty of separation, but also from the shops, it is next to another common driveway, shops. And if you look further west and on the opposite side, there are buildings of substance that are greater than a single-storey house. So if we were talking about this in your traditional LARA suburb, surrounded in a court or somewhere, yeah, I'd be the first to say this is an inappropriate development. But based on its unique context, it warrants a unique design. And we've tried to simplify the design to the streetscape, unlike the previous proposals, which had all the respective dwellings facing the street. We've tried to do something minimalist, simplistic, but also attractive at the same time. It's light in colour, you've got little darker accents. It's something that's going to age well, and regardless of how the area develops, we believe that this particular proposal will stand the test of time, and it's the way it's designed. It hasn't unnecessarily raised overall height. We've kept roof pitches rather low. We've combined some flat roofs. We've kept it sensitive, and even the colour scheme, the painted bagged brick downstairs, acknowledging the traditional areas, but also not ignoring the shops, going for something that's light in colour. And you'll have a front garden bed extending for most of the site. There'll be canopy trees there which will soften it up. There's screen planting along both sides. So as far as the development goes, again, a unique development for a unique site, but it's not something that's going to be detrimental to the character of the area. And I don't know about the previous point that I made. There is that correlation between dwelling size and affordability. We're looking at house and land packages in the outskirts of LARA, and they're starting at $750,000. That's out of reach for most people on moderate incomes, especially younger people. Someone moving out of home, this is perfect. A single parent has one child. There's a lot of these other demographics where it's low maintenance housing. It's compact, but it's also comfortable in terms of the way it's been designed, and the way that the rooms are separated. It's functional for a wide variety of households, and it's the type of housing that we don't have in LARA. So yeah, I welcome any sort of questions, or if there's anything in terms of that was raised by objectors that you may want to put forward, I can address, or we can talk about some sort of other amenity concerns. But as far as overshadowing goes, we've got houses with 15-metre setbacks from the shed rear boundary. Again, if you applied the winter solstice as the standard, you wouldn't get any development in areas. So again, we acknowledge the recreation areas are usually closer to the houses, and this, in terms of its bulk, height, size, and also the physical separation, and the fact that we've sort of kept the overall height to a workable minimum in a two-storey form, I don't believe that this will have an adverse impact in terms of overshadowing. That's unreasonable.
Thank you. Now, you're representing Luca, is that right?
Yes, I'm representing I work for the designer. So when it comes to these sorts of issues, especially where there's objections or where council is not supportive of an application, not only this designer here that's worked on this, but other designers engage me to try and develop an alternative design and basically try and get something that council considers acceptable in terms of a compromise.
If I heard you correctly, there were three design models. This is the third model.
There was more than that, actually, and because there were some models that haven't been presented to council.
Could you explain how you've overcome or how you've accommodated neighbourhood character, given the fact that you have to design in accordance with these? Yeah.
In terms of when I've looked at the streetscape and I've gone to the traditional, when I've gone to the traditional housing that's occurred further east on that site, it's one dwelling per block with separation from both side boundaries. So I sort of said, well, this would be a good starting point. Rather than having multiple dwellings orientated towards the street, let's have down the spine of the site, and we'll have the separation from the side boundaries. Again, we didn't impose large spanning pitched roofs and where it increases the overall height. We kept it rather modest, but we figured that the most important element in terms of the traditional housing that occurs in LARA is a house with a triangle-shaped roof, and that's what we've done here. And we've got a flat roof component on the side. It kind of acknowledges where the verandas and the shops, and it kind of, instead of spanning a big triangle over the whole thing and height, we worked on the design so it's sympathetic, so it can fit in. We put a large window at the front, and also where the smaller narrow windows are, we actually made them a bit of a feature. We put exposed shrouds that are coming out, so there's that. It's visually interesting. So what's being presented to the streetscape, we believe it's a modest design, and it's an attractive design. So we haven't tried to make it look like a gelati with 10 different materials and 15 different colours. So we've basically kept it the light colour and yeah.
Anything? Yeah.
Just in reference to the noise that was spoken of, and you talked about the heating cooling system being internal. I note that the way that the units are based on the block is there's not a lot of north-facing light, so there is going to be the need for heating and consequently cooling. So, yeah, can you just explain a little bit more about that system and how that will minimise the noise?
I have 1 minute just to speak to. I'll get it. I'll give you an exact answer.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. It's basically the external condensers to be completely concealed on the veranda and soundproof. So there can be a condition that can be imposed where we can actually demonstrate the type, and so it's basically it's to mitigate any noise emanating from the external air conditioners.
Just like to ask the officer, is that in the conditions at the moment, Amelia?
I'm just double checking. I believe that it is, but just give me 1 second.
I didn't hear the whole question, Councillor Wilkinson, but the basis of the question was air conditioner noise, is that right? Yes. And that was...
one of the objections, in relation, because there'll be there'll be a number of those facing the east. Yep. And in the context of they'll get a fair bit of use because of the orientation of the units themselves. I believe Environmental Health did suggest that the air conditioning / heating units were covered with a soundproofing contained within soundproofing, and that was because although they're facing the commercial area, they're directly off the living rooms of the proposed houses, so Health were concerned that they would create noise for the living areas of the dwellings proposed. When I provide my report to be reviewed, and so a change has been made and that has been removed as an amended plans condition. The applicant was more than happy to undertake it through our discussions with Environmental Health as well, so it can be added as an amended plans condition to put that covering, acoustically treated covering over the heating and cooling on the balconies of each dwelling to limit the noise that will come out of them.
And while you're speaking, can you explain what other noise conditions have been added? I think there was in terms of insulation, etc.
Yeah, so the reason for these is to limit noise from the bakery, specifically in the commercial area, into the proposed dwellings. Because bakeries operate, as Gordon said, that they operate really early in the morning, most days. So health were really concerned about that. So the entire eastern elevation of all 5 dwellings in the walls have to have a minimum of R2.5 insulation included in the construction for a sound shield wall, and they're also having bifold doors added to the external of each of the east-facing balconies, so they can be shut at night time, or the applicant has said it's made the areas more usable because in winter you could sit out there, but the reason is so at night, if you can close the bifold doors, there's even less noise that will come in to the dwellings and the living areas and the bedrooms upstairs. There's also solid walls to be installed. So between where each balcony joins the next dwelling's balcony, there's to be solid walls installed, and they would assist in reducing noise from each of the heating cooling units and to each of the other houses. So they are the recommended amended plans conditions, but we could also include soundproofing covering to the heating cooling units as well.
Thank you. Well, unless there's any more questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you.
And good evening.
Councillors, is there any further discussion? Is there a motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move the alternate recommendation that's been provided.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second that one, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. So would you like to put the motion, Councillor Hathaway?
Yeah, so my reason for putting the ultimate recommendation, based on what we've heard tonight from the objectors and the applicant, my view, there's been a range of issues raised, but for me the strongest argument is that it's the height and density of the proposal is not in line with the existing neighbourhood character. And if I can just reference a few things from the council report, council officer's report that has been provided to us, that there are very few two-storey developments within the immediate surrounds of the subject site. The density of the development is considerably higher than the surrounding residential development. The lot sizes proposed are very small, with only one proposed being just over 100 square metres, and these small lot sizes are not seen anywhere in the immediate neighbourhood. The existing neighbourhood character for this section of Patullos Road is for single dwellings on larger allotments. The proposal has a higher concentration of dwellings than can be found in the existing streetscape. I do want to note, as a council, we've recognised that there is housing stress, but I support the policy that we have in relation to increased housing diversity areas, and as it's been noted, this development is not in that increased housing diversity area. So I'll leave it there, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Sullivan?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. There's a bit of to and fro on this one. I do see both sides of the argument, and I do appreciate both the objectors and the applicant's representative being here to speak on this. In regards to two-storey, I'm struggling with that one a little bit, as I do see a few two-storey developments around the area within 120 metres radius. There's a couple. However, I'm very sympathetic to the overshadowing, especially when you get to that winter time of a year. That is quite intrusive. A big thing for us is the diversity of housing stock around activity centres, as this is one. However, being outside of what is recognised as one of our diverse housing areas, it doesn't really fit the exact bill that we're sort of aiming for right now. Notwithstanding, with the state's housing policy statement coming out, we are looking to move away from single standalone dwellings and engage in this sort of housing. But as yet, right now, and this is really up just to do some further high-level fixings, is that it doesn't actually fit in this area right here, so I can't make a decision based on that one alone. The traffic is incredibly concerning in this area. The Six Ways is an incredibly, it's a dangerous intersection, and something I talked to the local member about quite a bit and what we can do to fix that there. Designs, I would be more sympathetic if we're looking at maybe at 3, maybe 4 on the block. However, having looking at it, trying to fit in this 5, this density, this close to a very dangerous traffic area, one that it doesn't exactly fit the zoning and strategic goals for this area to be the activity centre with a diversity of housing, I'm afraid I'm going to have to speak against the application and support the alternative.
Thank you. Any other speakers? I'd like to, no? Yes, go on. I found this quite a difficult one because in many respects regulations have been complied with. But in terms of neighbourhood character, I find it on balance not quite appropriate. In addition, these small dwellings, high density, right near some shops. There's arguments in favour of that, but I just find that the whole high density situation in this area of LARA, which is not defined in that way and has a rural aspect, I think on balance it's disappointing that we couldn't have come up, or they couldn't have come up with a less intensive design. So I'm going to vote in favour of the alternate motion. So I'll put it to the vote. If there's no other comments, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour of the alternate motion? Thank you. The alternate motion is carried. We're going to hear the second case in a moment. You're welcome to leave if you'd like to. Thank you very much for your attendance. So we'd like to clear either be seated, please, or so 26 to 34 Sharland Road and 11 McHarry Street, CORIO. Please go ahead, Steve, is it?
It is. Thank you, Councillor Mason. Just a preliminary matter to address before I get into the summary. That's to say that on Tuesday the City received initiating orders from the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal in relation to this matter, which is now subject to a Section 79 review for a failure to grant the permit. This alters tonight's officer recommendation from being to issue a notice of decision that no permit be granted to instead recommending that the City advocate that no permit be granted when the matter is reviewed by VCAT. This is a recommendation that hasn't been reached simply or lightly. The committee will see from the details set out in tonight's agenda that there are some significant complexities to this application, but I'll absolutely do my best to summarise the application as simply as possible, and I'll be pleased to answer questions, particularly mindful that the applicant isn't here tonight to speak to the application and to answer your questions themselves. This application relates to two parcels of land. One is in private ownership and the other is public land in reserve, owned and managed by the City of Greater Geelong. The private land is on the corner of Sharland Road and McHarry Court and is commonly known locally as the former Rosewall Primary School site. The school closed in 2008 and was mostly demolished and has since been surplus Department of Education land until late last year when it was purchased by the current private landowner. The public reserve land is at 11 McHarry Court and it includes a narrow strip along the north side of the site linking McHarry Court and Connections Park East across to Connections Park West at the north side of the Rosewall Community Centre. The development site itself is limited to an area of 3.34 hectares, with the rest of the land to remain in public ownership, clearly Connections Park West, obviously. Planning permit would allow for the public land to be subdivided and acquired by the private landowner and developer once the reserve status is removed from that land. This could be done separately to this application, but instead it does form a necessary part of this proposal. So in addition to removing the reserve status from the land, the application proposes a subdivision in stages and that 108 dwellings be constructed each on their own private allotment. 48 of those dwellings are two-bedroom apartments at either ground floor or first floor level. The rest are mostly single-storey, four-bedroom townhouses, with most built attached and boundary to boundary or attached to each other, boundary to boundary, plus a small number of detached and three-bedroom dwellings. The subdivision includes creation of public access roads intersecting with Sharland Road and McHarry Court. It includes the creation of some public reserves for shared path links and a fenced retarding basin for drainage. The subdivision would also create a balance lot to remain vacant for future development, which is at the southwest of the site abutting the community centre. Public notice of the application was given. It attracted 9 objections, concerns related primarily to the loss of mature trees and vegetation from the site, the loss of access to the car parking that's adjoining the community centre, which is on the private land, the loss of publicly accessible open space, again on the private land, increased vehicle traffic and street parking demand, the density of the small lot sizes, uncertainty around the balance lot and how it might be developed in the future, and the effect on the operation of the Rosewall Community Centre itself. None of the required referral authorities required under the scheme objected to the grant of the permit. The City did seek comments from WorkSafe Victoria in relation to the proximity of this site and this development to the outer safety area of the Viva CORIO refinery. WorkSafe Victoria have advised against the grant of the permit. There is common ground among all of us that the land should be redeveloped for residential purposes. Evidence of this can be found in how the strategic planning of the site's evolved since the closure of the demolition of the Rosewall Primary School. It was identified as one of a few redevelopment opportunities by the 2012 CORIO Norlane Structure Plan, which was then amended or included as a part of the Greater Geelong Planning Scheme from 2013. In 2015, the scheme was again amended to rezone the remaining parts of the site to general residential zone and to apply the design and development overlay to this land. This overlay sets out objectives for how the redevelopment should proceed, and it gives effect to the former Rosewall Primary School concept plan that is shown in tonight's published agenda at figure 44 on page 161. Might be helpful to have a look at that if you wish to. It doesn't prejudice what I'm about to say, but figure 44 on page 161. I bring it to your attention, or the attention of the committee, just to point out that the site wasn't only intended to be provided for residential land. It was also intended to provide a public open space connection along the east side of the community centre, and to ensure that surveillance of public open space in the area was maximised in the design and layout. The application doesn't provide this and could indeed or instead jeopardise this into the future. The application also diverges from the DDO and the structure plan is in the intensity of the development that's proposed. Over the years, the city's invested significantly in strategic planning for population growth and housing, and has identified, we've heard tonight in fact, identified areas that are most suitable for all kinds of housing, from rural residential and low density housing all the way through to conventional suburban housing and of course medium and high density. Lots of less than 250 square metres are classified within our strategic documents as being medium density, and in fact high density is around that 150, so even smaller again. Our planning scheme encourages these to be located in some of our new growth areas, but specifically in well-serviced and accessible increased housing diversity areas. We've heard about that tonight. The subject site is not one of these locations due to its relative remoteness from activity centres, the closest in fact being the CORIO shopping centre, which is more than 1.3 kilometres away by road. Interestingly, 4 out of 5 of the proposed dwellings in this application are classified as either medium or high density, with only 1 in 5 reaching the size that it's greater than 250 square metres. Although this level of density is encouraged in our increased housing diversity areas, the scheme doesn't specifically prohibit that level of density on this site or in general residential zones. Instead, the scheme says that development must respect the existing neighbourhood character. But in this respect, the application has proposed a density that is twice and 3 times that of the surrounding neighbourhood. And in seeking to develop the site to this degree, it's failed to meet 12 of the mandatory Res Code objectives required for multi-dwelling developments and subdivision. And it's also failed to demonstrate that the mandatory minimum garden area requirement of 35% has been provided. So whilst it's common ground that there is an urgent need to provide more housing across the municipality and that this site presents a ready opportunity to do just that, this particular proposal represents an overdevelopment that doesn't give appropriate effect to the city's strategic policy directions or to the specific requirements of the scheme as it must. So for these reasons and others that are set out in great detail in the officer's report, I respectfully recommend that the Planning Committee advocate that no permit be granted at the pending VCAT review.
Thank you. Questions, councillors?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the rundown, greatly appreciated. Just so I can just go over again, they changed the recommendation recently. Can you just run me through what the recommendation is exactly now?
The recommendation now is, as an audit's gone to VCAT, VCAT now steps in as the responsible planning authority, not council. Council becomes a party to the VCAT review, which means that the recommendation for tonight is that the Planning Committee advocate, I've got the wording here if it's helpful.
Yeah, just read it out in full for me. Just the first paragraph.
Lost it, but here it is, it's somewhere. Advocate that no permit be granted when the matter is reviewed by VCAT.
Yes,
so advocate for, as opposed to decide to.
Yep, appreciate that. All good, excellent. And the applicant isn't here, nor their representative?
We received notice earlier in the week that they didn't intend to speak tonight.
And it fails to meet 12 res codes?
I missed that, sorry?
It fails to meet 12 res codes?
Correct, yes.
This might be a quick meeting, Mr. Chair.
Yep. I've got a couple of questions though. How did it proceed so far? It was in this mono type of density without any diversity. Had you given advice to them in that context?
We had, yes. So if my recollection's correct, there was pre-application discussions, but it's not until we receive an application, a formal application, that we have a live decision to make as a planning authority, of course. That application, if I remember correctly, came in late last year, around November. Subsequent to that, there was requests for further information and advice given formally. And the issues, and of course density is one of a few, were raised at that point in time. What we can't do, I suppose, as a planning authority is we have to allow the process to run its course, and of course allow applicants to have their application assessed on its own merit. We certainly advise that at various points along the way that officer support may not be forthcoming. We're unlikely at any early stage to flatly say that you will not get a planning permit or anything along those lines, because there are just too many variables that could occur, but certainly the advice was given. And I will say that at no point has I should explain, there has been a reduction to the number of dwellings proposed as a part of this application. Originally it was 120, but the reduction came about as a result of excising the dwellings from what is now the balanced lot. So it didn't actually increase lot sizes or anything along those lines as much as it did just took that part of the site out to reduce it from 120 to 108 without changing the net yield, if you like, of lots or lot sizes.
Thank you very much. Look, this is an unusual, we've had a lot of last minute information tonight about this, and the applicant's not here. One objector, I believe, is here, is Lisa McCarty, is that correct? And of course, you're objecting to the proposal, not to the council, not to the officer's recommendation, I take it. So, do you need to say anything?
Rosewall is a community centre that services the CORIO area, and we're a destination space as well. So people come from a long way to visit our services and interact with our people there. We are not against housing. We know that we need housing. We need housing stock in the north. I think it's too much, and it will impact on our ability to service that disadvantaged community already by reducing our car parks, increasing traffic. People won't come to our centre, we will lose funding, and therefore the community centre will then, impact our operations, and we won't be able to service the groups that we need to anymore. So we support the recommendation not to issue the permit, but we're certainly not against the increase in housing stock in that area, and happy to work towards something that doesn't impact on the community, fits in within the landscape, and services that area for social and affordable housing.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm glad that you've been able to say that so succinctly. So I don't think we've got any questions.
Great.
Unless we do. Do we have any questions?
Make a comment. This is extremely comprehensive, and I really appreciate the document and the detail as well. So well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillors, do we have any discussion? Do we have a motion?
Happy to move the recommendation. Yes, Chair. Happy to move that one.
Councillor Sullivan moving and Councillor Wilkinson seconding. Could you please...
As read.
As read. Putting the motion. Those in favour? Motion carried. Thank you very much. So that ended up being a quick meeting, didn't it? Thanks very much for your attendance and for your good work, gentlemen.